Uh, Chief Garlow and Melanie, I think you're going to get us started on this.
Yes, I am. Okay. This workshop provides information about fire protection and public safety related to the community as a whole, but also how Fanita Ranch would address important aspects of the development related to this topic. As we know, the Santee Fire Department is a full-service department that provides many services, among them being structural and wildland fire suppression, fire code inspections, and public education on fire safety. As part of the Fanita Ranch Development Review by staff, the Fire Department anticipates the services necessary to serve that project without reducing current levels of service throughout the city. Likewise, sheriff's services would also be needed to serve the new community. When an emergency occurs, the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department coordinate their efforts in a unified command. The proposed development would be located north of established neighborhoods and separated by open space, as shown on the next slide. This is a recap only for us. This is the overall site plan, which is 2,638 acres in size. Recall that Fanita Parkway, Cuyamaca Street, and Magnolia Avenue will be extended to serve the development. The Fanita Ranch villages and special use areas are depicted in color on this exhibit. The proposed project is within the water service boundaries of the Padre Dam Municipal Water District, and we have representatives from Padre tonight should there be questions about water. The property is also within an area designated as a very high fire hazard severity zone. Because of this, the project incorporates design features that address fire safety. A wildland-urban interface abuts the existing neighborhoods to the south, and the vegetation has been cleared along that perimeter historically by the property owners of Fanita Ranch. This is all part of the city's weed abatement program. The urban wildland interface is therefore a zone of transition between wildland and human development. The fire code requires that a fire protection plan evaluate a number of factors, among them the unique circumstances resulting from topography and flammable vegetation. Fuel-modified defensible space is required and is part of the project's development footprint. And these zones will vary in width depending on topography and vegetation. Other measures as listed on this slide include ignition-resistant buildings and structures, fire sprinklers, and plants among cobble covers that do not burn easily. Additional measures include, as I mentioned, the fire protection plan, an emergency evacuation plan, a wildfire education and outreach program for the residents of the proposed community, and a fire station. The proposal is evaluated for compliance with the general plan. The safety element addresses public safety with the following overarching goal in mind: minimize injuries, loss of life, and property damages resulting from natural and human-induced safety hazards. Key safety element policies are following on the next 3 slides. Ensure that there is an adequate water pressure to maintain required fire flow. Ensure that new development meets established response time standards for fire and life safety purposes. Require emergency access before construction begins on the site. and require emergency access routes wide enough to allow maneuvering of emergency vehicles. Meet structural fire protection standards in the fire and building codes, and require a new fire station and the services to meet the rise in service demand. The addition of a fully equipped fire station and the staff must adequately serve the proposed project while maintaining current response standards. An adequately designed water system would support firefighting efforts when they are needed. So Padre Dam is part of our review process and is very important. They have worked with a consultant to analyze and prepare a water study for the proposed Fanita Ranch development. 2 additional water tanks or reservoirs and 2 pump stations are going to be associated with this development. The water system requirements, including the water main, the pump station, and water tank sizing, have been determined by Padre Dam at this point. The proposed water system can meet the required fire agency demand and what is called a maximum day demand for the subdivision. And fire hydrants can be placed throughout the subdivision per the fire agency, or in our case, our fire department requirements. Padre Dam requires that all pump stations have the following criteria to aid in the supply reliability: a redundant pump capable of pumping the flow demand, an emergency generator for backup power supply to the pump station, and pumps capable of providing the highest required fire demand required by the fire agency. Now, law enforcement services would be provided by the County Sheriff's Department through an existing contract, and staffing would be commensurate with the need as phased development occurs over a 10 to 15-year period. This last slide is the closing slide that I use every time we have a workshop, and it's just a reminder that we try our best to keep the website current with updates and public notices. The draft environmental impact report is nearing completion, and the staff anticipates its release for public review in March. That public review period is 45 days in length. It will be available on the city's website, and paper copies will be available at City Hall. Jeff O'Connor with HomeFed will continue with part 2 of this presentation as we've done in the past, and we're setting up the computer laptop now, and there it is.
Good evening, Mayor, City staff, and City Council. My name is Jeff O'Connor. I am Vice President of HomeFed Corporation and Project Manager for Fanita Ranch. Before I get started, I would like everybody to know that I am not a fire expert, but we do have our fire experts here today. The 2 most important workshops that we are going to have are traffic and public safety. We take all the aspects of our community seriously, but nothing is more important than public safety. We have designed Fanita Ranch's public safety features based on facts and science. All right, let's get started. You've probably seen this slide before. This is Santee today. The green is Fanita Ranch, approximately 2,630 acres, and the light-colored yellow is the city boundary. Today I'd like to speak about 4 topics that will improve public safety: a new fire station, ignition-resistant buildings, brush management, and evacuation routes. A new fire station will be built in Fanita Ranch. The 2 existing fire stations are shown in red, one down by Padre Dam and then one in the eastern part of the city. Fanita Ranch will be constructing a new fire station. It will be centrally located in our town center and will serve not only Fanita Ranch, but the existing northerly neighborhoods in Santee. The fire station will be fully staffed and equipped with a Type 1 fire engine, similar to the one in the picture, and a Type 2 brush engine, which is out front, parked out front here tonight. The fire station will also have a small working area for the sheriff's department if they need it. And of course, the fire station will come with the Dalmatian in the picture there. Now let's talk a little bit about ignition-resistant structures. We will be building homes that are on the cutting edge of fire protection. They will have non-flammable roof materials. Most of the fires begin in structures by embers landing on the roofs. All our roofs will be non-flammable. They'll have boxed eaves. These boxed eaves will be underneath the overhang of the roof. They will be all boxed with construction materials such as stucco that does not burn. We'll have dual pane windows. The dual pane windows will also, one of the panes in the dual pane windows will be tempered glass, so it doesn't crack and break. It doesn't break in high heat. We also have interior sprinkler systems in every single home at Fanita Ranch. And then surrounding the homes, we'll have non-combustible vegetation. In addition to that, we'll have ember-resistant vents on the roofs, and also a lot of fires start on fences. That fences are typically made of cedar or some other kind of wood. They start on fire and they burn up towards the house, and where the fences attach to the homes, they burn and then they can burn the houses down. What we're doing is none of the fences that connect to the houses will be all non-combustible materials. We are also exceeding the safety codes at Fanita Ranch. We'll have additional access points and trail access for emergency crews. This will aid in, if there's an accident on the trail, we'll be able to get emergency crews into the trail system easily. It also will aid in fire protection in the open space areas. We'll have fire management zones for existing homes on Fanita Ranch, existing homes south of Fanita Ranch. Melanie mentioned that a little bit earlier, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We'll have wildfire education and outreach programs. We will also have the on-site fire station, and then we'll also have fire management zone inspections to make sure homeowners are in compliance. Brush management. Brush management is a big deal out at Fanita Ranch. As you can notice here, we have the house is below the green arrow, and then there's a slope down to the open space areas. We have 3 zones. Typically, there's only 2 zones that are approximately 50 foot each, but we're going to have 3 zones at Fanita Ranch. The first zone is going to be between 115 and between 65 and 50 feet wide. It will be irrigated. It will have vegetation that is lush and will be maintained all during the year. The next zone is zone 2, which will be a thinned zone of the vegetation, and it will provide another 50 feet of protection. We're going above and beyond that with another 50 feet in most of the areas of Fanita Ranch that are in the high fire-prone areas. So we will have between 115 feet and 165 feet for our brush management areas. We will also be building a trail approximately 50 feet below the homes, and this will aid in fire protection as well, so you can get the firefighters into the open space areas easier.
So a quick question on that. I noticed it was 10 feet. You were talking about you're able to get the cars to the people if they need to. How are you going to do that with a 10-foot trail?
There won't be cars on this trail. It will be people. If there's an accident on the trail, it will aid in getting the emergency personnel down to the person that's hurt, or you can pull hoses if there is a fire in that area. And we also have breaks between houses.
You're just talking carrying them out, basically.
Correct, but we do have fire breaks between houses every certain amount of distance, and we also have parks that are located that also provide breaks so that fire trucks can back up into adjacent to the open space areas to fight fires.
For a 14-foot trail, but go ahead.
I have a quick question on that also. Where I live, we have very similar type situation, except that there's very little access to where gardeners, for instance, tree trimmers can get in. And so a lot of times homeowners don't want to pay because it costs extra because they have to carry that stuff out or somehow get it out from a long distance. Well, is there an access, the same access available to those folks where you have like where the fire can go down or sheriffs can go down so they can haul trash and debris out so that it doesn't build up as a fire hazard?
And that's in our fire protection plan. And what would our HOA is going to be responsible for maintenance of these slopes, including the fire management areas. So they are responsible for trimming, making sure that the brush doesn't grow up, and also removing any dead vegetation. But the HOA will be responsible for that.
All right, thank you.
Will they have adequate funding, or the dues going to be able to?
Pardon me?
Well, this is a problem. I see Michael back there. This is a problem we're having up at Sky Ranch right now. Is they're having a problem trying to get the HOA to cover, to actually do work up there. So that's what I don't want to run into that problem again. So I won't go any further. I'll ask you in a minute, but will there be fees to cover that kind of thing?
Correct. And yes, we will be setting up a homeowner association fee per month per resident, and it will be.
I'm looking for a landscape fee.
Well, the landscape fee will be part of the HOA fee, and it will be approximately $100 a month. No, for the whole HOA. So let's talk a little bit more about brush management. Fuel modification. The next slide is going to be a fuel modification picture of all the zones and where the land uses are. Before I get to that, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about wildland-urban interface. This is, as Melanie said, this is where the development is adjacent to open space. And the county conducts after-fire assessments on all major wildfires in and outside the county of San Diego. The county has learned a great deal from 2003 Cedar Fire, the 2007 Witch Fire, and the Cocos Fire in 2014. Building codes and evacuations plans have changed dramatically from this information. This equates to newer homes are far less likely to burn than older ones. The sheriff works with the fire department to safely and efficiently evacuate the community in emergency situations. So this is a map of Fanita Ranch, and you can see on the outskirts of the development areas there's an orange yellowish color. That is the brush. Those are the brush management zones, and like I said, they vary from 115 feet to 165 feet depending on where they're located. It's a little bit more difficult, but you can see the blue or the purple area. We are also doing brush management adjacent to all roads that are adjacent to open space, and that is 50 feet on each side of the road. This is the southern portion, and you can see the blue area on the southern portion adjacent to the existing community. We are providing 100-foot brush management in those areas that will be done by our HOA. And I was talking to the fire chief earlier today, and he said that during the 2003 fire that came through this area, that was very instrumental in saving those houses on the south side of Fanita Ranch. Evacuation routes. You've seen this picture probably before. We have three roads that we are extending and improving. Fanita Parkway on the west side, Cuyamaca through the central area, and then we're extending Magnolia. Let's talk first about Fanita Parkway. Oh, sorry, this is showing all of the evacuation routes that we have going out of Fanita Ranch. Let's first of all look at the evacuation route on Fanita Parkway. What we have done is we've worked with our fire protection consultant, and we only needed one lane in and one lane out of Fanita Ranch on all 3 roads. But what we decided to do is have 2 lanes out and 1 lane in. So that's what we've done to get vehicles out quicker in an emergency. So this is what it looks like. The northbound is on the right side, and you can see that's a picture of a fire truck. And then what we have is we have, on the southbound side, we have 1 lane going out, but we have a evacuation lane adjacent to it. An evacuation lane adjacent to it that will add a lane in the southerly direction. Similarly, the same situation happens on Cuimaca. But in Cuimaca, as you get down, so we still have 1 lane going north and 2 lanes coming south in the event of emergency. What we do have is as you get closer to Mass Boulevard, we have the situation where we have 2 lanes going out all the time, and we have actually another lane that could be used in the event of emergency, so we'd actually have 3 lanes coming out. In concluding, I'd like to review what we were talking about, the constructing a new fire station. The fire station will be constructed and open prior to the first resident moving into Fanita Ranch, and it will serve not only Fanita Ranch but the northerly sections of the city. We will be on the cutting edge of constructing ignition-resistant buildings all throughout Fanita Ranch. We have a brush management program that is far above what the city standards are. And then we have evacuation routes that are also far above the standards for the city, with the 2 lanes going out, at least 2 lanes going out in case of an emergency. So, concluding, our goal in the design of Fanita Ranch is to make the entire community of Santee safer than it is today. The fire chief, the sheriff, and our fire protection experts are here tonight to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have 10 speaker slips.
Go for it.
Well, I got some things I want to say also first. And one is that this has always kind of bothered me when we've talked about a development, especially those that are a little bit larger. Like with the last time Fanita was looking at being built, we were challenged on our fire prevention element. I felt at that time we complied with the state codes, our city codes, and things of that nature in our protection planning. But also thought that it was actually right on the borderline. So that if you just stepped a little bit too far one way or the other, it's not as safe as it could be. And so what I'm asking now is, I know that we've created a legal plan, or you're going to create a legal plan, and it's going to be approved by our planning department and our fire chief, and it's going to be brought to city council. But I really don't want it to be one of those, well, it's legal, but you know what, it could, well, maybe it could go one way or the other. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So not necessarily tonight, I don't necessarily need the answer, because I want to hear what our fire experts say. But I think you all understand what I'm saying, because this has to go beyond just, well, it's legal. Yeah, because just beyond, just short of, or just at legal is not what I'm looking for. So having said that, though, I was out on the fire lines in 2003 and 7. And in 2003, I was with Chief Bob Fole. And I don't know if you guys are probably just firefighters back then. And you probably remember it. But what I remember most is sitting in the truck and having fire come down hillsides. And I remember the chief directing firefighters to different locations. And I'm going, Chief, there's fire coming down the hill, and there's houses right in the way. I said, don't worry, John. The fuel, the wind is not going to allow this fire to come any further. And so what I learned is that fuel and wind and all those things determine whether or not you're going to get, more devastation. So I have to trust what my firefighters are saying. I know you've had a lot of training and get a lot of experience too. I know you've all been deployed throughout the state of California at one time or another on some major fire on a strike force, and you've seen what fuel and wind can do. And so I want not just the legal answers, but I want the answers tonight to come from your experience also. I don't think that's too much to ask, because it is a community that we want to protect, and they deserve those answers also. All right, having said that, Rob?
Yeah, the only question I have right now is, Jeff, you're talking about building a fire station that's going to be fully operable prior to the first resident moving in.
Correct.
That will also serve the north and northeast sections of Santee. But who is that going to be subsidized by? The staffing of that, will that be subsidized by you guys in the beginning? Because if we're not getting any property tax revenue coming in from any of that, and it's
We are going to build a fire station, equip it, and staff it until the tax base generated from Fanita Ranch is able to pay for it.
and you'd be doing that on your dime, not on.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question on that one. I know with Weston we did a community facilities service. Would you consider that? Because we're going to consider that.
We have been talking about that, not just for public safety, but for other items as well.
You're right.
And if there's a need there, then we will go.
If
We
we
have
do-
the option to do that.
Yeah, we need somebody to pay for it, because we're not going to pick up the bill on it. So somebody's got to pick up the bill for that.
We understand that you have a very aggressive city manager, and she is.
And and we're learning to like those things.
You're not paying for it.
Okay, yeah, because I mean that's an important thing to keep in mind. I go back to landscaping too. The HOA is controlled by that, but I know that it's right there on El Nepal on Suzie Place. That whole area was run down because they did not plan well in their landscaping plans. There is a landscape district there, and we had to go back to them and say, hey, you're paying $50 a home per year. And, it's costing like $300 a home per year. I don't know what we finally ended up with, Marlene, but you could probably, but it's like, we have to plan for the future. So there should be an escalating cost in anything that we do, and landscaping has to be enforced. I had half the staff up in Sky Ranch trying to solve a problem that we shouldn't be solving. And that's something that I don't want to run into. If we do this project, I don't have to run into that.
Well, landscaping is the number one cost for an HOA, followed by water, and
Not my problem.
So we've done this before up in San Marcos and down in Chula Vista, and we have very strong HOAs, and they're run efficiently, and the maintenance will be impeccable.
To Councilmember Hall's point, we hear this. Well, we've heard this lately, at least a lot, that housing never pays for itself, it doesn't take care of itself, and so on and so forth. And a great portion of that is because of mandates that have been brought down by the state that weren't here when developments were done. Number one, but beyond that, there were no escalators built into a lot of the maintenance districts in the past, and so other than one landscape maintenance district in the city of Santee, they've all been maxed out, some of them for 20 years, though the cost has not stayed the same as it was 20 years ago. So our staff now knows about this. The staff pays attention to these things, and make sure that those types of, we don't put ourselves in those positions again. So for lighting districts and landscape maintenance districts and all the other stuff in the new water quality control maintenance issues, these are all things that are being built in with escalators to new projects to ensure that we don't end up in the same boat that we are in now. But those things didn't exist back then. So you make the best decision with the information that's available to you at the time, and now we have new information. And as we continue to do that, we make better decisions. So I just wanted to make sure that that was brought out. There are ways where that developments do actually pay for themselves, and they do pay for themselves into perpetuity. But we need to make sure that we're doing the right things on our side if any project's ever approved to help ensure that. And I know it's a lot easier when it's a larger project to do that than it is on the little small ones. But it's funny, the larger projects are the ones that actually pay for themselves and other things in the city. The small ones don't tend to pay for themselves because you can impose those things on them because they're too small. But the small projects are what people are saying, oh, no, we only want the small ones. So those are the ones that actually don't pay for themselves. So it's a little frustrating, but I just want to get that out there that that's how it all works, guys.
All right. Stephen, you have anything? Okay, I'm going to do that, but I want to just make one more comment here so you can be thinking about this while we have speakers. And that is, I've had the opportunity to sit on some disaster preparedness panels throughout California, and the big emphasis has been on fire protection and disaster preparedness. The leader right now in that, well, let me say this first. Many of those fires and disasters have been referenced back to and found a nexus with utility companies, okay? And so I guess since 2007, SDG&E, for instance, here has been creating some great programs. They're known throughout the state, and as a matter of fact, the country now for their community fire safety programs. And so I like to make sure that we are collaborating with them and talking to them about what they have to offer. Most people don't know it, but they have the #1 weather prediction service in the country. It beats the National Weather Service even. They can predict down to almost the day and hour that you're going to have strong winds and when those winds are going to cause issues. And so I think that knowing that when you create buffer zones, they can tell you where the greatest amount of winds will go through a canyon or other areas, and that will help with us in some of our fire protection planning. I probably don't have to tell you all that, but I just want to make sure that it is out there so that we make sure we don't leave any stone unturned. So, all right, let's go ahead and take speaker slips.
Dan Bickford.
How many speakers do we have? 11. We do have 11 speaker slips, so since we're starting the actual public testimony, Council, I'd like to say that we're not going to accept any more at this point. Okay. No, we're going to go 3 minutes. We'll get out of here tonight.
Will the next 5 people please stand up? Janet Garvin, Michelle Perchez, Mark Hartley, Dennis Schroeder, and Teresa McCarthy.
Thank you.
Well, good evening again, council and staff. In truth, fire is everyone's concern. Pretty much Santee in its entirety was once in a high-risk fire area. Well, what changed? Well, development changed. Homes, asphalt, fire hydrants, and enforced fire codes stopped fires from spreading across the city. Some point to the Cedar Creek fire and say that when this next happens, or when this happens again, well, a lot's changed since then. We have a lot more fire coordination since then. And I also have to point out that, we didn't lose a single home in the city limits of Santee. The Paradise Fire was a horrifying example of a firestorm. Studies now are starting to come in. 18% of the homes survived. Every mobile home park completely burned. But digging deeper into the statistics, 51% of the homes using modern fire codes after 2009 survived. Even more of those post-2009 homes might have survived if they'd maintained their defensible space. After reviewing the documents, I believe that Fanita Ranch has the most advanced fire protection requirements in the county. That should make our future residents some of the safest in the county, or in the state, should a fire erupt. Thank you.
Janet Garvin.
All right, let's hold the applause, please. We got to get through all the folks.
Okay. Janet Garvin here. I still oppose Fanita Ranch. I oppose sprawled development. I oppose it for all the same reasons that I've expressed up here in the past. The environmental impact, traffic, accessibility, building in a high fire hazard zone, cost, lack of affordability. HomeFed has promised a lot, and I understand why people are excited about the project. It seems glorious. The slick propaganda that they put out looked really great. However, I would propose that a lot of the people in this room, in 10 years, they're not going to want Fanita Ranch. They're going to want downsized housing close in rather than bigger places away from the town center. Okay, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about the money. I know the council is looking for revenue, and I know that there's been talk about the $8 million of tax revenue that they're projecting that's anticipated. But I'd like to also talk about HomeFed and the revenue that they're throwing out there for us, the marketing money that they're throwing into this, a tremendous amount of money, the introductory brochure, the breakfast meetings, the bus to the community farm, the pre-council dinner meetings, the Facebook ads, the free school, the free firehouse, the money for Scenic Route 52, the developer fees, all the money that they're putting out up front and they're planning to continue to put in. If HomeFed is willing to gamble and put at risk all that money up front, it only makes me wonder, how much do they anticipate that they're going to gain from this project? And who's going to be the winner in this gamble? It's probably not going to be us. It's going to be HomeFed. Thank you.
Michelle Purchase.
Yes, Santee is a fine city with great quality of life, and we want to maintain it as such. There was a young family here in 2003 with a 1-month-old son that watched that fire crest that hill, had their bags packed. The lights went out overnight. Yeah, it was scary times. It definitely was. So it's great that a lot of people feel so secure by all the details presented here tonight, but I do not have peace of mind in relation to this project. And a lot of people in the city also do not have peace of mind. They're not able to be here tonight because they're with their families, they're working, et cetera, et cetera. People are busy. Doesn't matter what you do, right? You can't really predict what that fire behavior will be. And as such, you put your community at risk, this wonderful community that we all love. You can't predict what people will do, I just read last month that a kid burned down the Borrego Palm Canyon in Anza Borrego, right? People get careless, right? Do you have a plan that requires residents to practice? Because if the residents don't know what to do, right, you have the situation as you have in Paradise. They had a great plan. They were going to evacuate certain zones in certain order, but that didn't happen. And you can easily dismiss that example because it was a forest and we do not live in a forest, but that can happen here. Our community can be devastated just like Paradise, and that will be on your minds all the time. So please take careful consideration of your decision. Quit being obsessed with making that dollar. Remember, the vocal minority speaks for the majority of Santee on Fanita. Okay, it's not a minority. And the last thing, I'm wondering if Ron Hall will recuse himself because he is claiming to insure houses in brush areas. He should recuse himself from the vote on Fanita Ranch project. Thank you.
Mark Hartley.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Hartley.
Can you pull the microphone up just a little bit? Speak into it. Thank you.
Certainly. I've lived out in East County for over 40 years, and I've watched our little city of Santee grow. It's grown positively. We've had a very positive impact with the shopping and the restaurants. I look forward to the continual growth and the excitement of Fanita Ranch and what it can bring to Santee. My children go to school out here. My wife and I entertain out here. We've done soccer. We've done YMCA. It has been a great experience, but it wasn't here 20 or 30 years ago. It's a recent development, and it's a positive development. Fanita Ranch is that next level of excitement that I look forward to. Please, please let this go forward. Thank you.
Dennis Schroeder.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I just want to thank HomeFed. They put together a good plan. As Mr. O'Connor was saying, it's through science and not emotion. You know, they're using the multiple lanes for the evacuations, the extended brush management zones. And with that, you know, they're providing for a safer new community. So if you haven't driven their existing master plans already down in Chula Vista, up in San Marcos, I encourage you to do so because they are an experienced master plan developer, and we are very lucky that they have Santee in their sights. Thank you.
Teresa McCarthy, if I can get the next 5 people up also. Van Collinsworth, John Olson, Justin Slaffley,
Good
Mike
evening,
Root,
Council.
and Eid Fakuri.
Just a moment.
Go
ahead.
Good evening. I'm Teresa, and I just wanted to voice my opposition to this project altogether, as I've done in the past. And I just would strongly urge all of the council members to take careful consideration of all of the Santee tax-paying voters, residents who will be very negatively impacted by this project, and a grand majority of which are usually backed up on that freeway while we're sitting here going over PowerPoint to tell us that because there's stucco and tile on buildings and, you know, drought-resistant plants that wildfires, you know, show discrimination toward that. That's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, that's all I have to say, and I know that you will consult with your own consciences along with, you know, what you believe is right for the human beings that will be inhabiting anything that you decide to, you know, put in that space. Thank you.
Van Collinsworth.
Good
Good evening, Council. Van Collinsworth. FYI, I'm experienced in direct fire suppression and prevention actions, having worked for 2 wildland firefighting agencies. I'm not speaking for either of those agencies right now. This project, in a designated very high fire hazard severity zone, will put new residents in harm's way and increase the risk for existing residents on the wildland-urban interface. Wind-driven firestorms move through the air past fuel breaks. 2 courts have already ruled against this type of development in this location. The safety problems should be obvious, and the risks are growing as our climate breaks down more rapidly. There are also costs that must be borne by taxpayers. City, federal, and state resources are required to defend developments in high-risk topography. Costs are rising rapidly with the risks. For example, fire insurance premiums are rising, and companies are dropping homeowners and leaving homeowners and the state with the burden of expensive and potentially inadequate state fair plan for coverage. I've had homeowners complain to me about being dropped in both battalions in the county that I've worked in over the past 2 years. Taxpayers must pay for actual fire suppression costs that have been setting new records. CAL FIRE costs have tripled in the last 7 years, going from $240 million in a season to well over $700 million. Forest Service costs have exceeded $2 billion as fire seasons lengthen. In fact, local jurisdictions count on taxpayers to subsidize fire protection for risky developments. And that is what happens when state and federal agencies assist in local response areas. Sprawl development is a Ponzi scheme. It doesn't pay for itself. City leaders who are drawn to initial revenues are ignoring the long-term costs. Guiding Principle 9 from the County of San Diego General Plan exposes the revenue myth promoted by developers and their operatives. Quote, national studies indicate that a residential development does not pay for itself, requiring an estimated $1.42 in public expenditures for every dollar it generates in tax revenues. In California, this deficit is even greater due to the limitations of Prop 13. In addition, dispersed development patterns are costly to serve because they require a more extensive road network for transportation and fire protection, law enforcement, and emergency services. The USDA, for example, found that the capital costs for public infrastructure are typically 74% greater for low-density, semi-rural development than for high-density development. Property taxes do not generate sufficient revenue to fund operational costs. Unquote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a speaker slip from John Olson, who supports the project but does not want to speak. Justin Slaffley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you again for having these workshops. They have brought a lot of great information to the community, I think to the Council, and we're hearing a lot of great commentary tonight, and I personally learned a lot tonight, so I do appreciate these workshops. I hope they continue on other subjects. I think they're very useful in considering Fanita Ranch. So this workshop, once again, the information has provided many answers to a lot of the questions of Santee residents and myself. Wanted to point out, in case the Council can't read, you'll see these green tags a lot of people in the audience are wearing. The text on it says public safety first. A little tough to read, but I don't know who could disagree with that. Public safety first, that's always the perspective that this Council should have. Certainly with respect to the potential new residents of Fanita Ranch and the existing residents of Santee. So that said, I know that this Council takes their responsibilities seriously, and they're going to condition this project with a lot of great things that we've heard about, and possibly even more. And it's going to be a safe project. It's going to follow all the best practices. It's going to be a project that's approved and conditioned based on facts, not emotion, and those are important things. I hope this Council will keep that in mind in considering this development. Having listened to the presentation, I believe that this plan will improve fire and public safety for all of Santee, and I say that because I hear about a new fire station, brush management, defensible space, fire protection plans, and all of that is a vast improvement over what we have now, which is semi-unmanaged open space. So that's how those fires get close into Santee today. We have a lot of older homes. And, you know, that's quite frankly a danger to Santee. So we have an opportunity to improve that and not on the city's nickel. And so that's an important consideration. I think it will be an improvement for the existing residents. And I do believe with everything that we heard in this presentation that it will be safer for future residents as well, or future potential residents if approved. I also want to remind this council that, we're hearing a lot of fear-mongering and, operating out of a place of fear. We're never going to get a great first-class project that we deserve here in the city. Something's going to happen up there. It's not going to be open space forever. Something's going to happen, and we want the best. HomeFed is a responsible developer. They do responsible master plans. They've been working with the community for a long time. They've been present at public events, and they're really listening to us. And, in the same way, they've hired fire professionals. The city has wonderful fire professionals on staff. Listen to the real fire professionals. Let's not listen to fake firefighters, okay? Thank you.
Mike
All
Root.
right. Please hold your applause.
Mike Root.
I'm not opposed to Fanita Ranch. I am opposed to false promises and fantasies like the presentations we just saw. You don't abide, we're not talking about the developer, you don't abide by your own code and plans. There's no reason to think you're going to do it in Fanita Ranch. So Fanita Ranch, by my count, that looked like 6 zones. You don't enforce 2. We've got 2 FMZ zones. You don't enforce those in Sky Ranch. And we're paying $220 a month in fees. There's no amenities. All they have to do is manage the landscape. They don't do it. For whatever reason, they're irresponsible, they're stupid. They're actually paying their landscaper for continual landscape maintenance. They just don't do it. Mr. Hall, thank you for coming out. The dead tree is still standing there. The debris is still laying there. The fuel modification zones are not irrigated. They are not regularly maintained, period. Come to my house, look at it. Ironically, the fire department is oblivious to the year-round threat and the code requiring year-round maintenance. So they actually exacerbate the problem because they tell the HOA, well, we're coming out once a year to look at the brush. And so the HOA says, hey, we're in compliance with the fire code. No, you're not. It requires year-round maintenance. So the fire department's actually making it worse. They mentioned for Fanita Ranch there's going to be non-combustible vegetation, and they mentioned the wood fence is not going up to the house. There's one across the street from my house where the wood fence goes directly to the house. I can show you homes with prohibited plants where that's the predominant plant in the front yard. The fire department doesn't enforce it, the HOA doesn't enforce it, and the city doesn't enforce it. Regarding enforcement, the streets have not been turned over to the city. So the sheriff's department still cannot come up and enforce for infractions. So they can't cite someone for speeding, for running stop signs. So when homeowners fill the streets, including the fire zones, which would block access for the fire department, there's no one to call because the sheriff can't enforce it. Now, I don't want you to turn over the streets prematurely, but I asked this council 7 years ago for an ordinance allowing the sheriff to enforce it, and you didn't do it. So it's still unenforceable. There's just all sorts of things you don't follow. A habitat manager was supposed to educate the public, was supposed to do newsletters, attend meetings. They do none of those things. Frankly, they put up a kiosk, and it's more a source of litter than anything else. Your plans are a joke when they're not enforced. This is a joke.
Eid for Curry.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. In 2003, I lived in Carlton Hills, and the fire was coming down, as you know, on that ridge line. And our fire department, full of troopers, they did what they could. And at our street, they left us a hose. They said, here's how you hold it. You aim it this way. And they literally went from cul-de-sac to cul-de-sac where the hydrants were, dropping off hoses. And so I'm not sure if the ratio that we have today to our risk is sufficient. And I think that in this project, although they're adding a fire station, How do we know the ratio is really adequate when we were facing that in 2003? The other point I want to make is the devil's in the details. I made my living the last 35 years being an auditor. I look at the details, and I'm not a politician, although considering it, but we'll see. In the meantime, so what I'm seeing is when I met with Home Fed, the road that goes down Fanita Parkway, it starts 2 lanes one way and 1 lane the other way, but then it gets to a 1 lane on each side. It's a chokehold. So my advice to the council and staff is, I know it's a lot of material to go through, but there's details in there that we're going to have to live with after this project's completed. And I don't want to make a rash, quick political decision, but we have to go through each one of these aspects and make it right. And I'm not sure if we're doing that, because this was just a cursory high level. I know there's some information behind it. The other thing I want to point out is small government. I'm a big believer of small government. I would like to look at a hybrid of private services. Pensions are super high. It's very expensive. Government services are very expensive. Is there a blend where we can have private services, that the HOA is responsible for certain aspects of fire safety, but we maintain inspectors, we maintain certain aspects of it, we maintain the station. Is there a hybrid? Because, these costs just keep escalating. I know Rob, he was going after the cost years ago, and something we should look at. We have to manage the cost, but unfortunately taxes do need to go up sometimes to cover these additional services or fees. So I just would think that there's more that needs to be looked at before I think we can agree on what's best. So I hope the workshops continue between staff and council and that we get into the details. Thank you.
Vicky Call, and then the last speaker is Danny Jack O'Brien.
I'm Vicky Call, and I've been a resident of Santee for about 43 years. A lot of you aren't even that old, but I have opposed Fanita Ranch from the get-go. I'm not against development, but what I'm against is huge developments that are going to affect our community with large numbers of traffic. We already have traffic jams. I know this is about fire. I had to get on the freeway the other morning to go to a medical appointment, and I'm retired, so I don't usually have to deal with this. The traffic, this was at about 10 after 7 in the morning, was backed up beyond West Hills High School. Also, I don't know if any of you have gone into the development that's across from West Hills High School. When you first enter the development, the road is extremely wide. As you go in, there's homes built only on one side of the road, so we have a lot of space. The further in you go, the narrower the streets are. I don't know what the plan is for Fanita Ranch, but the streets got narrower and narrower so that in order to keep going, you had to wait for a car to come this way, move over a little bit, because there's cars parked on both sides of the road. So you'd have to move over so this guy could come. I went 1 mile back. I gauged it. I went 1 mile back, and there's no other exit. So 1 mile back, people have one way to go in and out if they have an emergency. So, and that wasn't the end of the project either. It still goes further on in. I don't know how much further, but that is the only exit. In an emergency, I can't imagine those people getting out safely. I have so many points. Let's see. Oh, not too long ago, we were asked to reduce our water usage by 20%, but we keep adding and adding homes. How are we going to provide water for all these people? Okay. Will there be any low-income housing in this plan? And I noticed that terminology has a lot to do with how people respond to things. The terminology that they were using is they were going to extend the streets, Magnolia, Fanita Parkway, and Cuyamaca, when actually what they're doing is accessing our streets. And all of that traffic is going to come onto our streets. I live across the street from Santana High School. I can hardly get out of my complex in the morning. I can't imagine what it would be like when we have more homes and more traffic. So as I said, I'm not against development, but I am against development that's going to affect the quality of life of those of us who already live here. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny O'Brien.
Evening, Mayor and Council and staff. It's nice to be here again. It's been a while since I've come to a meeting, but I've had a lot of experience with Fanita Ranch. We moved to Santee in 1978, and then we've been living at on the first phase of Fanita Ranch for 36 years now, and right up against the open space up above the lakes. And so we've had chances to see the different fires that we've had, and how our fire department was able to respond to that and save the houses. And also another thing I don't think people ever give any recognition of is that Barrett American and now Home Fed is already doing things to help with the fire protection. They come
Dan, you need to stay
they come in every year, and they cut a fire break behind our home, and seemed to have gotten wider and wider. And when you come time to fight a fire from your backyard, it's good to have a big open space, and they run that all the way across the city. And I think that's one of the things that, and when you get the development in there on the new project, the same people tonight who are opposing this project are the same people who killed having approximately 1,300 homes on 2,600 acres. So now they've got it to where they're fighting 2,900 homes. And from what I've heard, you keep this going, Sandag's eventually going to say, we're no longer going to give you any choice. We need low-income housing, and we're going to pretend 9,000 or 10,000 units out here. And that's where we're headed if we don't go for a common sense project like this that our community's worked on for years. I kind of wore out some shoes walking the precincts when we were fighting that Prop X. We won that battle, but then we lost in the end. But I'm still working on it, and I'm hoping to see this project get approved. Thank you.
No further speakers?
Thank you. Some questions that I've been able to. Michelle, you mentioned we can't, plan. You don't have to come up here. I want to make sure that you know that I'm responding to your comment. Okay, just making sure. I don't want to put you out. So anyhow, you talked about not being able to plan for certain emergencies, and I got to tell you, the Paradise Fire has been a lot in a lot of conversation, and when I've talked to the city manager and mayor there regarding what happened, and I forget, somebody else might have said that they had some plans there and how to get out and things like that. What they talked about, and other mayors from the other regions that the fire moved through, including Malibu, which was the last fire place to hit the fire, they said, we had all these plans. We did all the tabletops, and none of them worked. And the reason for that is because it doesn't matter how well you plan, there's always going to be something that happens that, the fire doesn't follow the plan. Crime sprees don't always follow the planning. Earthquakes don't follow the plan when you prepare for those. So, but the idea is that you plan and you prepare and you have an emergency operations that will respond, that you can respond to, and having a fire and a police or sheriff's department that will work together, and an emergency operations center that is extremely sophisticated will help to reduce. We're never going to prevent something bad happening during a disaster, but we have to prepare for something. I know that we have community emergency response team members who were trained throughout our system, trained by firefighters and deputy sheriffs on how to be short-term community leaders to give direction during emergencies. And that's one of the things that we do here that many other communities don't do, and they fall a little bit short of preparing. So I agree with you. It doesn't matter how much preparing you can do, you're not going to be able to always stop a disaster. but we also can't stop living because we're afraid of a disaster. And Mike, hold on. Mike, you made a comment about, I think it was, how do you know about the ratio of adequate services and things of that nature to people going in? I think that was, you're the one that said that. Was it? I don't, maybe it was Ede. I don't remember. I'm sorry. Well, I can tell you right now that there should be some kind of modeling for that. Chief, is there a model to figuring out how many firefighters and how much equipment you require in order to service communities?
Yes, sir. With regards to fire and ratios during a fire, not so much, but as far as emergencies, yes. Fanita Ranch has addressed that in the fire protection plan. We generally see an increase of about 100 calls per 1,000 residents.
Okay, so you basically say, oh, we need so many firefighters then in order to handle those extra calls or additional calls, I should say?
That's one of the factors. Another factor outlined in our safety element is response times, which we would see in this development because the response times from our current stations is so long that it wouldn't meet the current safety element, which further requires a station in that area for response.
Okay. And so now, if we do have something going on here that fire breaks out or something like that, and we are in need of more firefighters than we have in our city, what happens?
Well, sir, we participate in a very robust mutual aid system.
What does that mean, mutual aid system?
Mutual aid and automatic aid are agreements with our neighboring agencies, including the ones adjacent to our community, as well as statewide. Much like your comments earlier that we've been all over the state fighting fires. As a matter of fact, I was in 2008 in Paradise on the 2008 Paradise fire, so I spent some time up there. Under that same system, firefighters potentially from that Chico area or up north would be here in the event of a large fire. Localized fire would immediately pull resources without boundaries from the closest agencies.
And would we be calling firefighters back to duty that might be off?
Absolutely. We have plans in place that are a tiered response. We have the ability to mandate our firefighters return to work, much like we did in 2003 at, I think, 5 a.m. I got a call and said, you will report to duty within an hour. So we do have those plans.
Okay. And that mutual aid that you're talking about, is that also why sometimes we see a truck or an ambulance or something else rolling through Santee that is like from Lakeside or El Cajon or others?
You're absolutely right. Over the last few years, we've seen a significant change in the way we operate. In years past, we had boundaries. With the advent of GPS and advanced vehicle location devices in our apparatus, we utilize what's called a boundary drop system now. So for our routine calls, our routine fires, our dispatch has the ability to track all of our units and all of our neighboring agencies' units. So they're able to receive a 911 call, get a location on that call, and send the closest, most appropriate resources regardless of agencies. So
is that specific to the Heartland Fire Communication System, which we operate under, or do they interface with, let's say, San Diego or another fire agency dispatch?
They have seamless communications with both the San Diego Fire Rescue Department Dispatch Center and the Emergency Command Center at Monte Vista through CAL FIRE County Fire Authority.
Okay, so if we, in the event this would ever be approved and they started building, would we have to create any other joint powers agreement or something similar to that to make sure that, for instance, San Diego comes over that hill on 52 to help fight a fire, or that El Cajon comes through, comes up Magnolia Avenue, or is it still going to be covered under the automatic or mutual aid system?
No, sir, there would be no further requirements for agreements. It would all be covered under both local mutual aid agreements and the California Master Mutual Aid agreements, as well as it's important to note that recently, within the last 2 years, we've created a mutual threat zone with CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE, this addresses a couple comments from speakers earlier. CAL FIRE has over the last few years realized that keeping local fires small saves them tremendous amount of money from fighting giant fires later. So with that agreement, it's a mutual threat zone, so most of our northern part of our city that abuts wildland is covered under this mutual aid agreement that CAL FIRE, even within our city borders, will immediately dispatch air resources. Fixed wing is what we would call them, airplanes that are very expensive. I believe they're about $40,000 to launch. So if we had a fire in our jurisdiction, we would have to make those decisions on whether or not that's needed based on fire conditions. And we would, at that point, in real time, commit to $40,000 bill. Under this new agreement, CAL FIRE, if it's within that mutual threat zone, which is about a half mile depending on topography and the map lines, automatically launches and provides those services to us at free of cost. So that's a major update in that mutual aid agreement and monetary savings and a benefit to our city.
That was going to be one of my next questions, believe it or not. And along with that, though, is, and I don't know if you can answer this for sure, or maybe Tim can answer this. If we were to have a disaster that size, and we had to have all those other agencies in here, call people back from, from home. It probably, do you think that would, or I don't know who actually would ask, I should ask about this, but what I'm thinking about, does it rise to the point of being something that we would address as a disaster, get state funding or reimbursement or federal funding? Who can actually answer that question?
Well, sir, as a former emergency manager, I think I can speak to that to some degree. Major emergencies of wildland fire, there's avenues for cost recovery through the AFMEG program, the Fire Management Agreement program, which we would, as a fire agency, immediately apply for, and that would cover at least 75% of the cost of any firefighting. So if we had a local emergency that was not a threat to SRA, which was state response area CAL FIRE, which would be on the northern end, and it's kind of, there's several agencies responsible. If it was localized and we had to call those resources in and it wasn't in the mutual threat zone, it could easily run in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. We would be eligible for at least 75%, which was seen of cost recovery, like was seen in the La Tuna fire. I believe that was 2017 in LA. Some of those LA city or LA county fires that are not a threat to the SRA, the state responsibility, and are the costs of those are borne solely by the jurisdiction. They're reimbursed. It's a little more than 75% because there's a couple little other calculations that are included, but it's a minimum of 75% potentially cost recovery on those.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Mayor, to follow up on the chief's comments, the additional action that the city would take if there was that kind of a threat, whether it was earthquake, flood, fire, some other natural or human-made disaster, when we got to that point, the city could call an emergency declaration. We'd go into our emergency operations center, open the EOC, and at that point, once that declaration is made, assuming that the county and then the state declared this area as a natural disaster, we would be eligible for funds, perhaps not for everything, but that would assist with the cost. And that's not because of Fanita Ranch. That's currently the way things operate right now.
As an example of that would be the 2016 flooding that we experienced, CMP failures and those things. An emergency declaration was made by the governor, and I believe we had close to 100% cost recovery on the damages suffered in not a wildland, but a local disaster.
I ask those questions because I'm concerned about, Ron brought up at one time about the cost of all this business. Okay, I'm going to move on to addressing this, and Sean, you might even be the one that can answer this. You also talked about private services like fire service, and I'm even guessing maybe even police service could be thrown in there since we're talking about public safety. I can tell you just between you and me, I would never, ever go for a private police service working in our communities because, first of all, I think there's a lot of liability because they're not trained at the same level that our professional law enforcement are. And regardless of whether or not they're private security, we still take on all of the risk of their any action they take under the color of authority. So whether it's a beating or a death, we're going to get sued and be responsible for it. And then fire service, I would tend to say that it would be difficult for us to have a private fire service because we're still, once again, going to be responsible for what happens or doesn't happen. Or let's say we send out a private ambulance service, a private paramedic, and we're still going to get, if there's something that happens, we're still going to be responsible for that. Does any of that sound right? Well, the other thing, too, is I don't even know if we could do that now under AB 5. Or whatever that.
I think we're focusing on funding our existing services and extending it if the project is approved. That is staff's focus, and we'll continue to have that focus unless you tell us to do something different.
Well, there was a question about whether we could put, private stuff up there, and I
don't think that's a realistic option for this project.
Thank you. And then we had a question about water usage. Who's here representing Padre? Can you come on for a moment, please? And because I have a question for you, and when you do that, please state your name for the record. Sorry, guys, it takes so long, but I got a lot of questions here.
Hi, thank you very much. Courtney Mail, Engineering Manager for Padre Dam Municipal Water District.
All right. We heard about this big percentage of reduction that was required by the governor a couple of years or so ago, and what that meant. Now, can you confirm whether or not we really had that much problem with water shortage here, or was that a regulatory water shortage created by the state of California? And today, do we have enough water to supply the homes we have? And is there going to be enough water in the future to provide for any homes that we build, whether it's 8 homes or 2,900 homes?
That's a lot of questions.
Sorry about that.
No problem. From a statewide perspective, the 20% reduction was a statewide reduction in water use. Our residents had honored that, actually, and then some. Locally, we had invested in a lot of local supplies and a lot of projects to bring water here. So it didn't necessarily have the same impact, but we certainly had to meet the same standard. And so we did have to ask everyone to reduce by 20% to follow that state standard. And like I said, the residents of Santee definitely came through on that. To answer the other questions about do we have enough water, we have an urban water management plan that we prepared in 2015 that defines the amount of water needed for this community, including what was needed for a proposed development at Fanita Ranch, including what was needed in the village center and the infill parts of the project. And then we have to, for this project of this size, we have to do a water supply assessment as part of SB 610. For any project that is going to exceed 500 units. We have done that assessment, and we will be going to our board on Wednesday of next week. And per that report, it shows that they have enough water supply for this region for the next 20 years, including for the Fanita Ranch Development Project.
Does that include for firefighting mitigation?
It does. We did a water supply study to determine, based off of the fire department's conditions and their requirements for fire protection of that area, and we're able to meet throughout the region, the highest fire demand required.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or not, but like I talked earlier about, well, there's a legal requirement, and we met that legal requirement. I want to make sure that when you say we're going to be able to meet that water demand, and you did mention for 20 years, but my guess is in the next 20 years we'll find other ways of providing additional water supplies. But does it just show that we can do that many homes, or we could do more than that? Because it's one thing to say, well, we're proposing 2,900 homes, and we're going to be able to get the water to 2,900 homes. But you know what? I like to know, can we even do more than 2,900 homes, just so that there's a, I don't want to come short because we had a, drought one day.
Yeah, the urban water management plan and our master planning for water includes the zoning from City of Santee. Also, our water district extends all the way out into Alpine, so it's a much bigger region, but we use the zoning for the county or the agency of jurisdiction to determine our needs for the foreseeable future, for the 20-year projection horizon, and that's why I say 20 years, because urban water management plans have a projection horizon for that threshold. We will be redoing our urban water management plan coming up in the next year. You have to update those every 5 years. We'll also be updating our master plan to correspond with that. Right. And so from our perspective, based off of the zoning, we have enough water to meet the needs of this.
All right.
Are you considering the advanced water treatment plant too, or is that will that be in addition?
That would be in addition. We did not consider that. It is mentioned within the report as an additional item that could add in or add value, but because that has not gone through all of the approvals and hasn't been pulled the trigger, we haven't started construction. We did not consider it in our water supply assessment.
And once that's done, how much water will that produce if it's fully in effect?
I actually would defer to Mark Nemec for that. I can give you, he's our director of engineering, he's here as well, but it's projected to be 15 million gallons over the per day over the.
And roughly how many homes would that supply? Sorry.
Each home is approximately 480 gallons.
Okay.
So without doing the math.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I don't have any more comments or questions at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and see if Rob has anything.
Let's see. One of my questions was with regards to the emergency lanes. It was brought up that the emergency lanes are going to bottleneck. My understanding was the 2-lane emergency exit lanes, basically out of the project at all sites, were 2 masked for emergency purposes. Now, the width, it may be look like 1 lane, but it's actually were designed so that in an emergency, 2 lanes of vehicles can go down that. Is that not correct? That is correct. Okay, so it is 2 lanes the whole way down, all the way to mast.
It's 1 full width lane and then 1 emergency access lane,
okay,
which is wide enough to utilize.
Okay, I thought so. Let's see. All right, now just start. And there is like I said, everybody's got a plan until they're punched in the mouth, but there is a plan for orderly evacuation out of not only this project, but out of any part of Santee that's already in the books. Is there not?
As a matter of fact, there's multiple plans, from the plan provided in the EIR, the city's EOC, Emergency Operations Plan Evacuation Attachment. The County of San Diego has an Annex Q of the Emergency Operation Plan. All of these plans identify or address evacuation. To your point, and I think to some of the speakers' points, evacuation and how we handle it has changed since 2003. We've had some sophisticated upgrades in evacuation and how we affect that evacuation. As Melanie mentioned, Unified Command is a general principle that we work with every day. The Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department work hand in hand almost daily on fires in evacuation as sort of practice under that incident command system. 2 points that I think should be identified in how we address bottlenecks and those things of those natures that we've learned from issues like during the Cocos fire, which I have to note. Our captain was the incident commander on the sheriff's side of the Cocos fire during the evacuation process, so we do have quite a bit of experience to speak of. 2 main improvements in evacuations that have been seen over the last couple of years are geotargeting, utilizing GIS system. The county has created public safety grid maps, which are available to all first responders, and the program and training has been rolled out over the last 18 months, I believe. That plan was made with Sheriff's Department, CAL FIRE, and many fire agencies, as well as SDG&E was a main factor in developing those public safety grid maps. Now, what that means to us is the county's broken down into grids and subsections of grids. The successful evacuations we see are specific, targeted, tiered, staggered evacuations, meaning we don't evacuate like we did in 2003, the whole northern half of the city when it immediately bottlenecks. We tier those and we focus our efforts in specific areas that are under threat, as opposed to general notifications that was seen kind of in Cocos fire. The advent of cell phones and the way those wireless emergency alerts go out were broad. During the Cocos fire, I believe evacuation orders were received via cell phone, registered cell phones on the Alert San Diego's from here to Orange County. So you can imagine the bottlenecking and the trouble that caused. In January of 2018, the FCC introduced rules mandating wireless carriers such as AT&T, Verizon, create the ability to geo-target to a 1/10 of a mile. So what that means to us is that is a huge difference in
blocks.
We can utilize the public safety grid map. Fire resources can show up, assess the risk, the fire, the direction, the intensity, the speed, immediately communicate that through a grid map system. An example would be we want 3241D through A or whatever, where prior to that it was kind of just this block to that block, so we ended up making huge sections, which contributed to some of that bottleneck. Now we can grid that off. We can get it to the Sheriff's Department immediately. The Sheriff's Department is our wireless emergency alert agency, so they're the ones, they have direct access through the Sheriff's Department to get those alerts out through the wireless emergency alert system to that geo-target. Area of 1/10 of a mile, where now we're talking blocks.
Yeah.
Other lessons that learned, this captain can speak more to this, but lessons learned on their end, they're very good at evacuations, and what they've learned is you don't send all your people to the neighborhood affected. You send some resources downstream to intersections and free up those lights, and you post those lights. Some advancements also with our EOC, if we had time to set it up, as we saw in the Cedar Fire, we had several hours. We knew it was coming before it hit the city. We were waiting for it, basically. If that happened today, we would have the ability to open the EOC immediately. We can have it open within a half hour, and we can have eyes on intersections real time through the traffic cameras. We can assess what each intersection is doing real time, real vision, and make real time decisions on making those traffic decisions, moving it to the south or the east or west.
Or any direction you needed to go.
Any direction we needed to. So there's been serious sophistication in the evacuation process. So to your question about bottlenecking and the emergency planning has changed also. Some of the plans that have failed that the mayor spoke of were very specific plans with specific trigger points. And that's very dangerous when you say, hey, if there's an incident here, this is exactly how you evacuate or how you respond to that emergency. We know yes, and if that's a controlled situation, that's how we'll respond.
They're rarely a controlled situation, though.
What we see now is what we train on is general strategies, tactics, and objectives. And we utilize and employ those sophisticated systems that we have in our engines on the computer to benefit us and to solve those problems. But every incident, much like the fire protection plan identifies and does a great job identifying that although you can plan, no emergency is going to present itself the same way, and you need to be able to fluidly respond to those.
But that technology allows you to do that in real time between the two entities and organizations, and organizationally provide a plan that's the most efficient given the circumstances.
Absolutely, better than we ever have before.
And that's only getting better as technology is getting better, and being able to pinpoint where a phone is, like you said, cell phones. If you're able to do that, I mean, it's going to get even tighter on that.
And
the coming months, not years.
Although the rules are in place for the 1/10 of the mile, the wireless carriers are catching up with it. They're not quite there yet, but we understand they should be there in the next year or so. And already the grid map system is there. Those alerting has been improved. So
thank you very much for that. That helped a lot. Someone talked about developer making money. And goodness, yeah, yes, developers make money. So do restaurants, so do grocery stores, so does everything. Otherwise, you don't do it. That's what they do it for. Nobody does anything just to lose money, unless you're apparently the state of California. But yes, that is not a bad thing for a developer to want to make money, just like it is not a bad thing for any business to want to make money. I understand a concern of doing it at the peril of somebody else, but that's subjective to from one person to the next person. Lack of affordability was brought up a couple of times. That lack of affordability is because of a lack of opportunity. It's lack of affordability is because there's not enough housing, period, in the county. When I don't know if anybody watched the USD economic report that was done. UT even did an article on it, and the headline was San Diego economy doing great except for housing. And I heard that from numerous people. See, the housing market's crashing. And I thought, wow, that's crazy, because I see what's going on every day. Then I read the actual article. The article talked about except for housing, because housing is so far behind that it's not allowing for the jobs that are being created. It's not providing enough housing for the jobs being created. For every 3.7 jobs that have been created in the last 8 years, only one house has been developed. So unless we're going to have people coming in living 4 families or four workers to every single home, that's not sustainable. And so when you have some of the higher end jobs that are able to pay more for any house, that forces the workforce housing to become even more expensive. So you have to be able to provide housing at all levels, not just the very low, but the middle and high end, to open up the market as a whole and provide more housing, more options, and that, just in and of itself, helps with affordability at all levels as well. If there's only 4 doodads and there's 20 people that want to buy those doodads get expensive, period. And that's the more that we hold back, and the more, and whatever excuse we want to make out of it for why we're holding back, the more we hold back, the more expensive it all gets, so that the affordable housing isn't even affordable anymore. It was brought up that that all sprawl development doesn't make sense again, and 1.43 cents for $1.43 for every dollar, and that's a national average. And even in the quote, semi-rural development infrastructure and safety is, I agree, semi-rural development infrastructure and safety is more expensive because it takes more resources to get people from here all the way over there on small, sometimes dirt roads. We are not in a semi-rural community. We're in a suburban community. Santee is not semi-rural, although anybody that's west of the 5 thinks we are. We're not. This is a suburban community that does not have public safety traversing many miles to get to the action. It's just, you can't call one the other. It's not the same. Weston, the roads in Weston, that, the widths and all that stuff, that was designed under the city of San Diego's building structure or building codes, not under Santee's. No, that's not something that we're looking to do either. You hear from our fire chief how important it is for anybody to and that's not just, we're not talking about Fanita Ranch, I'm talking about any development. They've got to be able to get those trucks in and out, and parking has to be taken and accounted for with the road width and for the trucks to get in and out. And lastly, opposition to every development has existed. Every development in Santee that's been built, somebody opposed at one point or another. They didn't want it, including the houses that everybody up here lives in, every one of us. I know people that said, I fought against your house going in. My house was built just over 20 years ago. And even where these guys live, they were built a lot longer ago. Your houses were built in the 80s. People opposed those every single time. No more housing, no more housing, no more housing. Yet you all live in those houses that people said no more housing to yours. And now we're doing it to somebody else, and that is why there is such a lack of affordability in California. You can't just say no to this all the time. This is what it is. It's either going to be done the way we want it to be done and have control, or it's going to be done to us where we don't have any control, and it's not going to be a project that you're going to want to see in your backyard for sure. So that's my end.
Thank you. Stephen.
Going on.
Excuse me, Stephen. Can you get a little bit closer to the microphone? Thanks.
Anyway. I would expect if the development is built, that mutual threat zone would be adjusted to it only covers, or actually it covers some along the Santana, the wildland urban interface area on the east side of our city right now. So it does cover some streets and homes in a developed neighborhood. Falls within that mutual threat zone and their borders, and we use roadways so we can easily identify those borders. We may adjust those to a quarter mile, or depending on topography, fuels, things of that nature, but it would still, in my opinion, and I would fully expect to be in place, that would still be a mutual threat, because by definition it's a mutual, any area that's a mutual threat, being any area that a fire could start and move into SRA, is what CAL FIRE wants to spend their money on, to keep our local fires small before they become major wildland fires and expense.
And we're overdue.
There would be fire. Now, I want to move on to as much as it it's constant complaining about fire modifications.
Thanks, Ron.
I'm going to try and be a little briefer if I can. The evacuation route, first of all, the Fanita, that's one lane in each direction. They're going to expand that out. I know Padre Dam wanted part of that. Do they plan on making that two lanes all the way down to Masson, correct? I'm talking right on the lakes. So coming down there off of Fanita Parkway, right on the lakes.
Melanie, do you have that information?
Because right now it's
Yes, it would be 2 lanes from Ganley towards Mast.
So they're going in towards it. They're going eastward to open up those lanes.
They're going.
As I recall, they own that property.
Yeah, are we on Fanita Parkway?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is 2 lanes from.
Right now, it's 2 lanes from Mast up to where it dies, basically, to the campgrounds.
It will continue to be 2 lanes.
Okay, so they're not expanding that to 3 lanes, even though they said they were going to expand them to 3 lanes.
They are going to be expanding to 3 lanes in different, from Ganley to,
Jeff's there. Jeff, do you want to answer that question?
I think that would be better. Thank you. I don't have the map in front of me.
Sure. Fanita Parkway right now has 1 lane in each way.
Correct.
From Mass Boulevard to Lake Canyon, it'll have 2 lanes in each way. And then going north, one of those lanes gets dropped, but there's always 2 lanes coming south.
Okay, so we will be, and I'm talking about Lake Canyon. I couldn't remember the street it ended on, but so Lake Canyon down to Mass is what I was concerned about.
There's 2 lanes in each direction.
Okay, perfect. That's what I wanted to know. So that answered that question. The evacuation, I have a weird question for you, Chief. You know how you're talking about you can do a 1/10 of a mile or whatever? Do they have the ability of, like, saying, go to the WAS thing, going and telling them how to evacuate? Like, say, okay, you need to evacuate, take this route here, and then you get another group that goes, take this route down Magnolia, another one that says, maybe take this route here. Do they have that route available, or how does it just says, get the heck out of here?
Dan might be able.
Yeah, I may end up turning some of this over to Dan, but
okay.
The wireless emergency alert only alerts, or in the future, hopefully the near future, under that FCC rules, will only identify the area.
Right.
And that alert says whatever the captain wants it to say.
Okay, but I'm saying, take it, if it could actually direct them a route where, some of them are going down Magnolia and some of them are going down Cuyamaca, you may not have a problem.
So we can, through that alerting, the captain does have the ability to add, because they're increasing the characters also.
Right.
For those that understand, there's a limited number of characters available through WIA. They're increasing that almost triple or more to give a more information on that WIA. The captain would have the ability to real-time update those WIAs.
Because frankly, that might solve some traffic problems we'd have in the future.
In addition to that, I think what we're seeing in the real life responses, what we're seeing is Facebook, social media, those things are giving directions. And as you know, we have a pretty robust social media presence, both with the city and the fire department. And there's mixed messages in that. We want to alert everybody what we're doing daily, but also we want to create a following on social media specifically for emergency scenes. We are very good at getting information out quickly, because if we don't, we know somebody will, and it may not be accurate. So to your point, we can utilize our social media platforms, our connections, our real-time interactions between under Unified Command with the Sheriff's Department. The sheriff can tell us immediately real-time what each intersection looks like, even before we have our EOC open, or if we don't have time yet. So to your point, yes, we can update those. We can tell them which way to go real-time based on.
Yeah, because I think that's how you'd make a plan, basically. And I just didn't know if it was available. So you were going to say something?
Councilmember Hall, I think, fortunately with the Sheriff's Department, San Diego County Sheriff's Department, we cover about 4,200 square miles, and a lot of it has to do with wildland risk. And unfortunately, over my years, I've had the experiences, like Mayor, you talked about. I was directly involved in the evacuations in 2003 of Ramona and Valley Center, and these really bottlenecked areas as well. I was also squad leader of in the 2007 fires. I was the area commander of Paula, Valley Center, Palma during the Cocos fires, which were the sister to San Marcos as well, and ultimately seeing that the Department Operations Center. So in these cases, I talk about, hey, look, there are incidents where the law enforcement is the lead in an incident, and and fire will be our support. In this case, Unified Command, we take the directions, we take them strategically with fire, and I will echo the sentiment that we have learned a lot of things along the way. We've gotten better at doing these things and strategically moving things quickly. However, we need to do that through the main arteries, through the veins of the capillaries to get people to safety. Right. And really we take the direction and the expertise of fire behavior directly from the fire department.
Good. And I know that since 2003, I mean, it's just night and day. I remember at one point they were saying 500,000 people were evacuated in San Diego, and you're going, well, that's just total chaos at that point. But everybody back then, if you remember back, that was chaos. You know, I'm on the other end of the fires. I'm on the aftermath of the fires. I've walked Crest. I've given out blankets for Shadow Mountain to people and clothes and things like that. We worked with Shadow Mountain to do that. I've been on the All-State CAT team, or been with the All-State CAT team. And when you're walking through somebody's ruins, it's not fun. So it's a tough job. So we want to make sure that when these things happen, if this does happen, that we are prepared so we don't have to do that. In 2003, we did our job. The fire department did their job, and they saved the city. That's a bragging point as far as I'm concerned. It's also a little scary part because now your standards are that high, but it's good that you did such a good job back then. And it really is, when you have 2,500 homes in Rancho Bernardo and all that area going down, that's not a good thing. In 2007, I've mentioned this before, my brother's house in Rancho Bernardo, or right above North County Fair in Escondido, burned down. And I was there for that one, and I had actually realized that it was a problem. And so I actually said, you need to start videotaping everything in your house. And everybody laughed at me. 12 hours later, his house burned down. So it's something that we need to make sure that we're prepared for. And the mayor, and like Rob said, I guess the best way is you're completely prepared until they punch you in the face. The city, since Marlene has been here, has done a fantastic job. I mean, we actually have an emergency center now. So, and everybody, I guess, has done a fair, back then we didn't, before then we didn't even have it. So, and we are preparing for this, but again, it's not really there until we do it. As far as Fanita Ranch goes and fire station, I assume those are our fire trucks, wherever Jeff is. You're not buying us a fire truck, are you? Two. Are you buying us two? Okay, they're $1 million each, by the way, just so you know. But the manning of it, I go by the trust but verify, and I see what's happening at Sky Ranch, and we need to make sure in the fine print that we have the ability to go in there regardless and start holding people accountable. I would like to see Sky Ranch put on the agenda, or at least in closed session, frankly. I think the time has come. We've talked about this enough, and the time has come to deal with it. So they don't want to deal with it, so we will at that point. So that's about it. I will remind everybody, public safety is first, and that's what we're here for. We're here for public safety. We're here to make sure that when there's a problem in the city, it's taken care of. And we have bought fire trucks. There's a brand new one sitting out front there. It just came in. It's a really nice one. Look at it on the way out because it's a really good fire truck. And that's what it's here for, is to protect us. It's a brush rig. It can go in those hills and it can take care of it, and that's what we want. With the Sheriff's Department, I would not go with anybody else, frankly, because the Sheriff's Department is a professional agency. All you had to do is look at some of the things that have gone on, the El Cajon event, the Trump rally where they marched them across that bridge, all the demonstrators, and brought them across the bridge and shut them down. So there's, I don't care what politics you're with, When you had a problem like that, they took care of it. When the El Cajon shooting happened, they're the ones that came in and bailed everybody out. So we need to, our public safety is the sheriff's department first. There are priorities here in the city. There's no way I'd even consider anybody else. Sandag, what can we say about Sandag?
Don't.
Everybody keeps talking about, and it's called the NIMBY thing. And actually, I think if you listen to the news today, the whole NIMBY thing came up again today. And NIMBYs are not in my backyard. Now, I understand a lot of this, frankly. You know, I'm not taking a stand either way. I don't, you know, to me it's not that big a deal. But the reality is we need to, we're being told to build. We're absolutely being told to build. Those 8 units, we had to build them. They fit, you know, Stephen agreed with us. It was all, the ones over there by the old RCP, those fit. We have to build. There are 900 units available right across Town Center Park. We're going to have to build. They're not up for our debate. There's nothing we can do. Those are 900 units coming in. So get ready for them, because they're going to be there. And there's nothing we can do whether we want to or not. So we have to build in Santee, whether we like it or not. There's a flash that keeps coming back called the SB 50, and the mayor can tell you more about it, but basically they're going to build for us if we don't. So everybody keeps saying we can't do this, but the reality is we don't have a choice. And I completely agree with everybody here, including Van on this one. We have to make sure when we build that we have the streets there. We have to make sure that when the time comes, we need and Home Fed, listen carefully, we need a service fee, community facility district, tacked on there. Because they're going to have to pay for their fire service or their police service, period. Weston did it, they're going to have to do it. So that's it, and they're going to have to pay for the parks, and they're going to have to pay for everything else. So plan on that being there, because that's happening. And so, and Melanie, read the fine print. That's all I'm saying. Trust but verify. We don't need another Sky Ranch, period. So put it on the calendar.
All right, then. Okay, I'm going to finish up some comments here. First of all, Jeff, could you come up for just a second? We've had questions about evacuations, and I think we've kind of beat this into the ground. Let me ask you this one question, I guess. These are silly questions, but I'm going to ask them anyways. You have traffic engineers working for you.
Correct.
Civic engineers working for you.
Yes.
Do you have planners working for you?
Several.
Okay. Do they have education experience in designing a home planned development that takes into account evacuations in areas like this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Melanie, does the city of Santee employ planners?
Yes, we do.
Traffic engineers?
Yes, we do.
Civil engineers?
Yes.
Are they trained and do they have the experience to look at his documents and the engineering plans and things that come from his company so that they will address evacuations in this city?
Yes, they are.
Well, like I said, silly questions, but there are people who say we don't look at that and we don't care. And I'm saying that professionals look at that. We're not the professionals sitting on the dais here. I am speaking for us. And I can tell you that's why we rely on the professionals. Okay? So I want to thank you for that.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I was in error, and I want to fix the record when Ron asked me, Mr. Hall asked me how many lanes there were on Fanita Parkway. From Mass Boulevard to Lake Canyon, there's 2 lanes in each way. Those two lanes each way continue all the way to Ganley. And then north of Ganley, there's 1 northbound lane and 2 southbound lanes.
Okay,
So
great,
it's in there
thank
then.
you.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
No, we are. We're adding a lane in each direction all the way to Ganley.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to address one thing is, because I know that Stephen made a comment about fire sprinklers in the home versus outside the home. Not a bad idea to have them outside the home, but you know what? If you have a fire in a home and it burns down, it probably is going to spread. So you want to put out a fire regardless of where it's at as fast as possible. Is that correct, Chief?
Well, doesn't the county require?
Yeah, I thought I knew that.
Well, we could be talking about two different things.
We are talking about two different
fire
things.
sprinklers designed to fight fires outside are not required, and
Correct.
I'm not familiar
right.
with that.
I understand that. I'm
irrigated-
just making a point that you want to put a fire out inside the home so that it doesn't spread.
Yes.
Period. As fast as you can.
Correct.
And so if you had them outside, that'd be great too. But there's no code that requires it to be outside.
No, just the irrigated vegetation in the
Right.
modified zones.
So, and then I want to make it clear again tonight that this is a workshop. There are no decisions that have been made here. So when we've had people ask to look into doing certain things, we'll be looking into those things. It's not like we already have this plan and we don't care what the comments are. We're just going to do what we want anyways. I know that the council's made recommendations and asked questions. The folks that have spoken tonight have made comments and recommendations, and we're going to continue to look at those. Some of those things will be, included in the plans. Some will not. That's why you have a workshop. In the past, we didn't have workshops. We just let happen what's going to happen. And you know what? It's important to have input from everybody, and that's what we've done. And except for the silly comments that I've made and the questions that I asked regarding evacuations, I think everything was pretty important to hear tonight. I passed a note to the city manager, hey, I think this is a great workshop tonight. And I think it's because there's a lot of people that were heard. And keep in mind what I said. I think there were a lot of people heard. Not just listened to, but heard. So anyways, unless there's any further, I'm not going to ask about that. Okay, I'm just going to say this workshop is now closed. Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience. We did spend a lot of time, but it's important time. Thank you.